Hello guys, this is probably my first video on YouTube. So I have always been fascinated with the various dimensions that we live in. We generally live in a three-dimensional world, but I was always fascinated with the fourth dimension since I was a child. And today I just want to recollect all my thoughts, all my knowledge that I have gained till now to perceive the fourth dimension. I know it's really hard to perceive and see the fourth dimension, and we can never really see the fourth dimension as a whole, but we will try to understand as much as possible about the fourth dimension and some topics related to time according to the theory of relativity. Now, talking about dimensions, we know that the universe started from singularity. Or the Big Bang theory is the most popular theory nowadays, in which we are told that the universe started from a singularity. This singularity that we talk about has no dimensions. So a singular point, a dot, uh, has no dimensions. So that's what that what the thing is, a singularity. Next, we come to one dimension. One dimensional object can move in a straight line, only left to right or up and down. That is, it can have only one particular axis, either the x-axis or the y-axis. So that's what a one-dimensional object is, move in a particular line. So that why it has only one mathematical coordinate. Now coming to the second dimension. The second dimension is a plane, is a plane. So second dimension is a plane, and a second dimension has two axes on which the object can move, y-axis and the x-axis, and it has two mathematical coordinates. Now we can explain the motion of an object in two-dimension plane in various formulas, like the formula of parabola, hyperbola, or we can also explain it in terms of linear motion. It depends on the type of motion that the object is having on a particular plane. So that's what it is, like on a graph, when we draw a graph, that's what a two-dimensional world looks like, having two axes only, x-axis and the y-axis. Now the interesting part comes out is the three dimension. Now the three dimension not only have two axes, it has three axes, which includes x-axis, the y-axis, that is height, and the z-axis, that is. So three-dimensional object can an object in three dimension can move in three particular direction: forward, backward, left, right, and up and down. So these are the three particular movements that is exhibited by an object moving in a three-dimensional world. Now coming to fourth dimension, this is where things get crazy. We have seen that what dimensions are. Dimensions are the further dimension, as we see that, like the second dimension. The second dimension is comprising of infinite number of infinite number of first dimensions, and the first dimension is consisting of infinite number of singularity. Like, for an example, as we can see that this is a line. So suppose there is a dot. If you expand that dot infinitely, if you expand a dot infinitely, that is limit x equal to infinity, if you expand the dot to infinity, then it becomes a one-dimensional object. That is a one dimension is consisting of an infinite number of singularities. One dimension is consisting of infinite number of singularities. Similarly, a two dimension is consisting of infinite number of a one dimension. S- Uh, so a two dimension is consisting of infinite number of one dimensions arranged in a particular order. So suppose this is a line, this is a line, this is a line, this is a line. So it makes up a whole two dimensions by adding infinite number of single dimensions. Similarly, if we add infinite number of two dimensions, we make a three dimension. That is, we stack two dimensions one above the other, and we get a three dimension. That is, infinitely adding two dimensions, we get three dimensions. So as we can see that dimensions on adding up give rise to a higher dimension. That is, a singularity, when we add it infinitely, we give rise to A first dimension when we add it infinitely gave rise to second dimension, and second dimension when we add it infinitely, one above the other, we get third dimension. Similarly, it's very easy to understand a third dimension when we add infinite amount of third dimensions, three dimensions, we get a fourth dimension, which takes the form of a tesseract. Now, the Tesseract is not like the Tesseract as seen in Avengers Infinity War and the Tesseract that Loki holds. Well, the Tesseract actually doesn't look like that. A Tesseract, if we see a Tesseract in a three-dimensional world, we will see it continuously moving with time. Because in order to understand a four-dimensional object in a three-dimensional world, we need to we need to add it with a particular constant, or we need to multiply it with a particular constant in order to perceive the fourth dimension, and that constant is time. So that's what Einstein said. Einstein actually perceived that time is the fourth dimension, but according to scientists nowadays and after various research work, time does there are some paradoxes that limit time, and that's why time is now believed to be not in the fourth dimension but in some other higher dimensions because of the grandfather paradox. Now, we will be talking about the grandfather paradox a little bit later, but as I told you now, so the fourth dimension is a collection of infinite number of three dimensions, and that takes the form of a tesseract. Or if you do not understand a tesseract, because a tesseract has a particular axis, just as we said, a singularity, when added infinitely, produces an axis or produces one dimension, that is the x-axis. When we add x-axis infinitely, then another axis comes out, that is the y-axis. And when we add x and y-axis together infinitely, we get another axis, that is the z-axis. Similarly, if we add infinite number of 3D objects together, we get another axis, that is the w-axis. In order to find out the coordinates of an object in a fourth dimension, like the coordinates of an object in a three dimension, an object has three coordinates, x, y, and z. In order to find out the object on a fourth dimension, we have to do the matrix of two three-dimension objects, and we have to find out the function of the fourth dimension. That is, we have to find out the coordinates of the y-axis. Now, in order to perceive the y-axis is very difficult because the y-axis is supposed to be perpendicular to both x, y, and z-axis, because the axes that are formed on achieving successive dimensions are always perpendicular to each other. Since they are perpendicular to each other, w-axis is obviously perpendicular to the z-axis and y and x. So w-axis is perpendicular to all the axes of the three dimension. Now, we cannot perceive it because our brain is mm, programmed to think in the three-dimensional world. That's why we cannot perceive it, because we live in a three-dimensional world, because everything around us is a three-dimensional world. But an organism or an uh, object of the fourth dimension, when they see us, they can completely see everything, because we do not have any wall in the direction of w axis. As you can see, as you can see, I am in a room and I am covered on all the side. There is I'm covered in the top side. Okay, there's the roof, below there is the floor, and on the four sides there are the walls. Okay, and there is the roof and the floor. So I'm covered in all the sides. So I must be thinking that, oh my God, no one can see me, right? But a fourth dimensional being obviously can see us, because we don't know, we have not covered the w axis, right? So there is no wall in along the direction of the w axis. As a result of which, when a fourth dimensional being travels along the coordinates of the w axis, they can obviously completely see us. So a four-dimensional being can completely pass through us and can telepathically communicate with each other in different region of the world. I think that it's humanly insane. Things are like they can do anything and everything, and we cannot even perceive or see or even understand them. That's what their power is like. That's what four-dimensional beings are, if they exist. If they exist, yeah, if they exist. So that's another thing. Next thing is, yeah, I'm talking too much now. In order to understand about the more about the fourth dimension, we need to understand about boundaries. What is boundaries? Boundary means something that ends, right? Something that limits us from going from one place to another. That's what a boundary is. Something that limits us from going from one place to the other. That's what boundaries are. Like suppose, as you can see, this is a strip. Now we can say this is one side and this one is another side. These are the two sides of the strip. That obviously makes this the boundary. This the boundary because an object coming from this side to this side, an object coming from this side to this side obviously needs to cross this boundary in order to go from this side to this side. Otherwise, an object cannot travel. Now, what if I tell you that it is possible to travel from this side to this side without actually traveling or crossing a boundary? That's what the theory of Mobius strip is like. Now, what is a Mobius strip? Mobius strip is something that think of it as like a two-dimensional object depicted as a three-dimensional. Now, this is a plane, right? As you can see, this is a plane. So this is a two-dimensional object, but I will depict it as a three-dimensional. So when we take this and when we do a 45-degree turn, just a second, when we do a, yeah, so when, and we connected this side, these two sides. Okay. So as you can see now, this is what a Mobius strip actually looks like. Okay. Now uh, now this is what will make you travel from one side to the other without actually crossing a boundary. So see, suppose this is the outer side of the Mobius strip. So this goes, see, we are traveling, we are traveling, we are traveling, we're traveling outside. See, but now we are inside. Yeah, and now we travel inside. Yes, yes. And then we again go outside. So this is what a Mobius strip look like. Mobius strip is nothing but the depiction of a two-dimensional object in a three-dimension. That is, without crossing any boundaries, we can travel from a two-dimension to three-dimension. This is what Mobius strip look like. Now, how can a two-dimensional object, a two-dimensional being living in a plane perceive this Mobius strip when we pass through them? They will first initially see appearance of a small circle and then the circle will decrease and then it will again increase and then it will vanish. Similarly, when we put a three-dimensional sphere or a ball passing pass it through the two-dimensional, suppose think of a being suppose a two-dimensional being is along this plane, and suppose this is a ball, and the you know this guy is this being is perceiving this ball entering into their two-dimensional world. Suppose this ball, it enters, it enters, it enters, it enters, and then so this what is happening, how will they perceive it? They will first see a line. Okay, a line, uh, as the sight is only in a particular direction, only they will first see a line because they cannot look up, right? They can move along this and this, so they will see a line that will grow bigger, that is the diameter will increase, and then it will decrease and move away. So that is how a two-dimensional being will perceive a three-dimensional object entering their world. Similarly, like I told you in the Mobius strip. Now, as I told you, what a Mobius strip is like. A Mobius strip is a strip which we can use to travel to travel from one plane to the other without crossing a boundary. Similarly, think of this in three dimension. We can travel from one place to the other without crossing a boundary. That's what the concept of wormhole is like. There are various mathematics and there are various formulas related to this wormhole, but I'm not going to go into the details because the mathematics is really tough. So I'm going to talk about the theoretical aspect. So a person moving from place A, place B. Suppose you were in India and you travel to Paris in a matter of seconds. How can you do that? Well, you have to bend space and time in order to travel from place A to place B without crossing any boundaries. That's what the wormholes are like. I may be wrong, but this is my perception. And obviously you can comment about your perception or your things or your theories, and I will try to answer it. And this will just be a hearty conversation between friends. So yeah, uh, so this is what a movie strip is. Just like a three-dimensional object, there is a four-dimensional object that can be expressed in three-dimensional. That is the Klein bottle. The Klein bottle is a four-dimensional object expressed in three dimension. So if you go in the internet and search about Klein bottle, then you can see how a four-dimensional object can, how a three-dimensional being can travel in a four-dimensional region without crossing any boundaries. So that is what a Klein bottle is like. Now, about all these things. Now, I want to talk about after all these things. I want to talk about time. Now, as I said, when a two-dimensional object was seeing a three-dimensional object move, they first saw what there was a line that increased in size and again decreased in size and disappeared. But if you see one thing, the moving object give them a notion of three dimension. Initially, they could not see the three-dimensional object because if the ball was static, if the ball wasn't moving, then what would have they seen? They would have seen just a line, right? If the ball was static, then they would have seen just a line, and they would have think, oh, it's just another line. I mean, they always see line because that's a two-dimensional world. They always see line, so that's just another line. That is, they will perceive the 3D object as a 2D object if the object was not moving. So in order to move an object, we need time. So as the motion of time, with the motion of time, they perceived the 3D object in their 2D world. So time is required in order to perceive a 4D object in our 3D world. So that's why we can always see a tesseract continuously moving. Why does a tesseract continuously move? For a fourth-dimensional being, the tesseract is a stationary object, just like for us. All the three-dimensional objects are stationary. But for a three-dimensional being, the tesseract is continuously moving. Why is it continuously moving? It is continuously moving because in order to perceive a four-dimensional object, it must be moving in a continuous fashion with respect to time, because that's what time is required for. So time actually helps us perceive a higher dimensional object without actually perceiving it. So it's just fantastic to think about it. It's mind blowing. So that's what it is. So in order to perceive a four-dimensional object, all you need is time to perceive it. So that's what time is for. Now, initially, Einstein believed that time was the fourth dimension. So we have three dimension. We live in a five-dimensional world. So we have three dimensions, that is height, then we can move up and down, left and right, forward and backward. And there was space and time. So that's what that was the initial theory. But now what happens that is that is now what happens is people have disproved that time is a four-dimensional object. Why? Because because of the grandfather paradox. Suppose my grandfather was born in 1952. My dad was born in, suppose my grandfather was born in 1920 and my dad was born in 1950 and I was born in something about 1980. So I, from 1980, travel back to 1920 and kill my grandpa. And if we could travel in time and go and kill my grandfather, then what would have happened? It would lead to a chain reaction which will cause my father to never have been born. And if my dad wasn't born, well, I would have been born. And if I was not born, then I couldn't go back in time to kill my grandfather. So my grandfather lives. That means my dad is born, and that means I am born. So I know this is a little bit complex, but we can understand it with the help of the Mobius strip. Suppose, think of time just like this Mobius strip, flow of time to be just like this Mobius strip. How can we perceive the flow of time just like this Mobius strip? This is, let this be the initial point. That is the point. Let this, okay, this side. Yeah. So this point, let this be the point of my birth. Okay. And let this be the point. Okay. Let me just, okay. So it's really the thing is, I'm new to YouTube. So yeah, I don't have all those things to make videos on, but I will try to, you know, buy all those items later on. I just want to make these videos, funny videos up for myself, so that when I grow up later, I can just use it as reference material. Because our thinking changes when we grow. So if I become dumber, yeah. So suppose this is the time when I was born, and let this be the time when my dad is born, and this be the time when my grandfather is born. So I was born. I move back in time to kill my grandfather. So my father is never born. That means I am born. Now, then again, I go back. See, we are going to the inner side now. We are not crossing any boundaries. We are not crossing any boundaries. We are going to the inner side. So this is the same as this one. So that means I am, see, I go back in time. This is in the outer segment. Okay, this is in the outer segment. So I go back in time. This is in the outer segment to kill my grandpa. And this is where my dad is born. So I go and kill my grandfather. So my dad is never born. That means I am never born. Now we are going to the backside. If I am never born, my grandfather, that is inside, is born. And that means my dad, which is again inside, is born. And that means again come back to the initial position. That is, I am born. So in a way, killing my grandfather is actually the way of making myself alive, means in order to make in order so that I can be living, so that I can take birth, I need to kill my grandpa. So if you think it in this manner, it's quite a bit of complex, but is supposed to be uh, time is supposed to be an element that runs similarly like the movie strip. It has no boundaries. Time has no boundaries. Now if you think time has boundaries, then that's the problem. Time has no boundaries. Time is continuously moving in a cycle. Okay, it is of a it lies in a realm that we can't even imagine. Okay, it's of a dimension that we can't even imagine. So yeah, I just simply explained it using a Mobius strip, that is without crossing any boundaries. I could correlate various points of histories in time. So that's it. That's all for today. And I will be posting videos later on about many more theories. So thanks for watching.